Hi, beautiful people. Welcome to the Fort Salem Library, where we read you your fanfiction. So sit down or don't, relax or don't, and enjoy these stories in a way you have not before. We at Fort Salem Library do not own Motherland Fort Salem or any of the related characters. The Motherland Fort Salem series is created by Elliot Lawrence and owned by Freeform. This story is a work of fanfiction and is meant for entertainment only. We are not making any profit from these stories. All rights of the original Motherland Fort Salem story belong to Freeform. We also do not own Her Song is a Sin, or any of its original characters and storylines. We did, however, get permission from the author to read their story. This story was created and written by Lou1, and you can find the link in our show notes. This story is being read to you by me, Britt. Her Song is a Sin. Chapter 4. "Hey, Dad," Raelle said, answering her cell phone and turning on the speaker function before dropping it back down on her bed. It had taken her a little over 3 hours to drive from the Ramshorn mansion back to her house, and after having dinner and preparing the house for another one of her extended absences, she was packing for her stay at the Ramshorn's property. She tried to call her dad earlier, but he'd been elbow deep in automotive grease, and told her he'd call her back later. Now Edwin Collar was calling just as she was in the middle of packing her things. "How's your ankle?" Edwin asked. "Oh, it's doing better," Raelle answered, not wanting to worry her old man. "Good. So you were saying you took on a new client?" "Yeah," Raelle answered, "a musician." "Anybody I would know?" Edwin asked. Raelle pictured the sexy brunette in her mind and thought of her signature song, and the music videos that went along with it. Blushing, she answered, "No, Dad, not your style of music." "Oh, okay," her dad replied. They talked a little longer about the weather and the upcoming holidays. They discussed Edwin's work and talked about the neighbors before finally circling back to Raelle's new job. "Honey, you be careful, okay?" "I will, Dad," Raelle promised. "I'll call you in a few days, okay?" "You'd better. I love you, Ray." "I love you too, Dad." As Raelle finished her call, she zipped up her final piece of luggage and moved on to packing her weapons. Penelope Silver shifted on the rotting mattress stained black with blood. Not all of it was hers. She had been chained to the wall by a metal cuff around her ankle, which only allowed her to move a few feet in any direction. She tried to swallow, but her throat was parched from lack of moisture. Her stomach ached and she wasn't sure if it was from being beat repeatedly or the fact that it was empty. She hasn't had to go in the bucket that he provided for her for a while now. And first, the man who had grabbed her coming out of the Quick Mart brought her food, but that was weeks ago, or maybe it was only a few days. She really couldn't be sure, because the back room of the basement did not have windows. He was going to kill her. She knew this because he had told her so. The same day she had been taken, he forced her to strip naked and then made her put on a miniskirt and black lace bra. He had roughly pushed a brunette wig on her head, and then he'd made her do things. Horrible, terrible things. She swallowed, willing her mind to stop thinking about it, but the memories came and she could hear music coming from above. She pulled her knees up around her chest and wrapped her arms around herself. It wouldn't be long now. He always came after the music played. He would come back soon, and he would kill her. He had it all on his computer. Alone, he sat on his couch, clenching the laptop. He smiled, knowing exactly what was going to happen next. He'd watched this video many times. On the screen, a spotlight illuminated a lone figure on the stage. She was magnificent. The music began and she danced to the rhythm of the song. Sexy, naughty, bitchy. Her voice was like a beacon in the night, and he leaned forward, his nose almost touching the screen as he watched her. Yes, she was sexy, and oh so naughty. She was a siren, encouraging other witches like her. Her song was a sin. For that, she would have to be punished, and he would be the one to make the bitch pay. Oh yes, she would pay. She would burn. He had practiced for a while now. Filthy horse he found in alleyways, and the odd girl he could catch alone when the opportunity arose. He wanted it to be perfect for her, so he honed his skills, and it gave him a chance to rid the world of other women like her, all beautiful but dirty, bitches, witches. As the music faded, he paused the video. The face of Scylla Ramshorn dominated the screen. With the music off, the place was quiet. A low clinking of metal could be heard from below. He cocked his head and listened to the sound of sobs. Gently he put down the laptop on his cushion beside him and stood. It was time to prepare the next present for his siren. Helen Graves paced back and forth in front of one of the maintenance buildings on the Ramshorns' estate. She didn't know if she was more embarrassed that she'd hit on the blonde yesterday, or more furious at the woman for making a fool of her. Raelle was her name. Raelle Collar. Jane Addams, my ass. And Mr. Parker had said she'd called herself Ann Lister. What the hell was that woman playing at? When Isadora had approached her yesterday and jumped onto her case about letting the blonde in without checking her out first, she'd almost told the frumpy old manager that she had indeed checked the blonde out, just not in the way Isadora had meant. She wasn't overly worried about getting in trouble, though. Scylla would never fire her. Still, she was shocked when Isadora informed her that she was being assigned to Raelle as an assistant. She had enough to do around the property and with helping out Mr. Parker around the house. What type of assistant did a bodyguard need anyway? Now here she was, up at this ridiculous hour, waiting for her new boss to arrive. She was about to go inside the main house to get a cup of coffee when she saw the blonde's white Subaru pull up in the drive. Raelle smiled at Helen as she approached with her 2 cups of Starbucks a few minutes later. "Hi, thought I'd bring you a cup of coffee." "Thanks," Helen answered, taking the offered cup from the blonde. The bodyguard was gorgeous, and Helen figured she would at least try to be nice. "Who are you today, Emily Dickinson?" Raelle chuckled softly and had the sense to give Helen an apologetic smile. "I had to see how hard it was to get inside." Helen frowned. "And it wasn't hard at all, was it?" "No," Raelle confirmed, "but we're going to change that." Helen nodded. "So, famous lesbians, huh?" "You caught me," Raelle answered with a cocky grin. The brunette laughed at the blonde. "Okay, hot stuff. What do we do first?" "First we finish our coffee, and then we'll take a walk around the grounds." Helen's brows rose. "You got your hiking boots and flashlight?" Raelle's face scrunched quizzically. "Why do I need a flashlight?" "It will take us all day and half the night to walk the entire property." "You got a better idea?" Raelle asked. "Yeah," Helen answered and gestured at the building. "We take one of the side-by-sides in there." Raelle smiled as Helen took out her keys and pressed a button on a fob. The large door opened to reveal a neatly stocked maintenance building complete with 2 side-by-sides parked inside. "Great. I hurt my ankle a few weeks ago at my last job, and it's still giving me some trouble. This will make things a lot easier. Of course, nearly tripping over a bunch of flowers on the footpath by the ballroom yesterday didn't help much." "Oh yeah?" Helen asked without further comment. "Yeah, what's with all the plants?" Raelle pressed. Helen's face remained neutral as she answered. "Scylla likes them." "Yeah, that's what Byron said. Surely she doesn't like them taking over the place, though." Helen frowned. "Look, I'm not derelict in my duties, or whatever you military types call it. Scylla has strict instructions to leave the plants the way that they are. That's going to be a problem. They pose a serious security hazard. Not only does it keep us from seeing what's going on around us, it also gives anyone who manages to get on the property plenty of places to hide." The brunette shook her head. "Look, I'll do anything I can to help you, but I'm not going to mess with a single leaf until I get Scylla's okay." Raelle gaped at the woman. She couldn't believe anyone could be so ridiculous about what essentially amounted to weeds. She'd just have to go to the source and have a little talk with Scylla about the grounds later. She made a mental note to herself to do just that. "Well, let's get that side-by-side and we'll get started looking at the other stuff," Raelle groused, dropping her empty cup into a trash can just inside of the building and moving to the side-by-side. As they rode along the perimeter of the grounds, Raelle made notes on a legal pad and asked Helen to stop here and there as she pointed out her concerns. She consulted the maps and made little notations on it to indicate potential placements for cameras. After they got done, Raelle would write it all up and consult the security equipment company she used. It was time for Scylla to use some of her money on updating the property. Scylla followed the progress the side-by-side made around the grounds from her bedroom balcony as she sipped her morning coffee. She enjoyed early mornings. Most people in the business didn't get up until at least noon and didn't go to bed until 2 or 3 in the morning. Getting up early offered Scylla the ability to relax and just be herself for a few hours. Now, though, her peace was disrupted by one Raelle caller. As the side-by-side stopped close by the pool, Scylla watched as the blonde hopped out. She was in a light gray suit today, her blouse the same pale blue as her eyes. At some point, Raelle had taken off her jacket, and Scylla's breath caught at the sight of Raelle's shoulder holster and how it stretched tight the fabric of her blouse, showing the faint impression of her nipples. Scylla swallowed hard and was so focused on Raelle, she missed seeing Helen hop out of the side-by-side. Now the groundskeeper stood beside the blonde, and Helen pointed at something Scylla couldn't see from her vantage point. Raelle let out a small laugh, and Scylla couldn't help but think again about the musical quality of her voice. The musician shifted up on her toes to look down at them over the balcony railing. She couldn't make out what they were saying, but they seemed to be getting along. Too well for the brunette's liking. Scylla frowned at just how quickly Helen had taken to the blonde. As their heads turned upward towards the balcony to discuss camera position, she stepped back in the doorway to avoid being seen. Even with the use of the side-by-side, it still took Raelle and Helen all day to assess the grounds. Some areas were so overgrown with foliage, they had to traverse it on foot. She was pretty sure her suit was ruined between the stains and the small briars that picked at her clothing as they moved into some of the deeper brush. It was hot and difficult work, and by the time they were finished, Raelle was tired and sore and in desperate need of a shower. When she had arrived on the property that morning, she had tossed her bags in the side-by-side and had Helen stop by the guest house during their survey to drop her bags off just inside the door. Now that she was done for the day, she could properly check out her new home away from home. But first, the shower. Her dad would have been disappointed by her lack of southern manners and neatness, but Raelle started stripping as soon as she walked through the front door and was naked by the time she reached the bathroom attached to the master's bedroom. The bathroom was practically as big as her living room at home, with one wall dominated by a granite-topped vanity. There was a basket there loaded with washcloths, hand towels, and an assortment of toiletries. The shower was large enough to practically hose off a small horse, and jets protruded from various spots in the walls. Looking up, she noticed a rainfall showerhead in there as well, and she smiled as she grabbed what she needed and stepped inside, closing the glass doors and turning the jets on full. Half an hour later, the massaging jets have eased her sore muscles and washed away the dirt and grime from the day. Raelle stepped out of the shower and dried off with a fluffy towel hanging on a rack. The towel was warm, and Raelle could see that the rack had some sort of warmer function that must have been turned on automatically with the shower. While her cursory inspection of the main house yesterday found it to be dated, the guest house certainly seemed to have all the modern amenities. The sound drew her attention to the living room, and she wrapped the towel around her as she walked through the bedroom and into the short hallway. She certainly wasn't expecting anyone, but Isadora had said the maid would be by at some point to make sure she had what she needed. Perhaps she was bringing her some of the things she had requested. As she stepped to the end of the hall, she was surprised to see Scylla Ramshorn standing in the living area, looking around at the mess she had left on the floor in her haste to get in the shower. Raelle cleared her throat, and Scylla looked up with surprise at the bodyguard standing in nothing but a towel. Her eyes raked over the blonde, taking in her lithe form and toned arms with appreciation. "Looks like you started it without me," Scylla said, smirking at the blonde. Raelle gave a soft snort and stepped forward to begin picking up her clothes. "Sorry about the mess." Scylla shrugged. "That's all right. I just wanted to stop by and make sure that you have everything you need." Yeah, mostly," Raelle answered. Feeling awkward standing in nothing but a towel, Raelle gestured. "Give me a minute, and I'll get dressed." "I don't mind you the way you are," Scylla answered, quite enjoying the view. I do, Raelle responded evenly. She turned on her heel to move back to the bedroom when she remembered her bags were still by the door where she left them that morning. Son of a bitch. Blushing, Raelle turned back and grabbed one of the suitcases, all too aware of the brunette's never-faltering gaze. Need a hand? Scylla asked sweetly. No, Raelle answered, voice clipped. As she walked back to her room, balancing her soiled suit, shoulder holster, and luggage, while trying to keep the towel around her, she could have sworn she heard the brunette softly chuckle. Raelle tossed everything on the bed and said a silent thanks for her basic training and the packing skills she's learned there. It only took her a few seconds to find her clothes and get dressed. She re-emerged from her bedroom less than a minute later, sporting a pair of gray sweats and a black sleeveless t-shirt. Hello again, Scylla teased. Hi, Raelle answered. Now that she was dressed, she took the time to look the brunette over. She was in jeans and a blue blouse with stripes. The shirt complimented her eyes, and Raelle had to force herself to look away. They really were bewitching. Can I get you a drink? Sure, Scylla answered. The guest house had an open layout, and Raelle moved from the living area to the kitchen behind an island that served as a raised dining table. She walked over to the refrigerator and then paused. I don't even know what I have. I'm just used to asking the question. Laughing, Scylla moved next to the blonde, slightly brushing against her as she reached up into a cabinet beside the refrigerator and pulled out a bottle of red wine. Raelle swallowed, and her skin prickled at the pressure of Scylla's breast as it pressed into her arm. Glasses are over there, the musician indicated and moved away to open a drawer to get a bottle opener. Raelle moved mechanically over to the cabinet that Scylla had mentioned and got out a couple of wine glasses. She stood there for a second, trying to tame the twitch of desire that Scylla's touch had running through her. By the time she had gained control of herself and turned around, her expression was a calm facade. Scylla had the bottle opened and was perched on one of the stools at the island. The blonde walked over, put the glasses down on the granite counter, and took a seat across from the musician. Scylla poured them generous portions of wine and let her fingers brush Raelle's as she handed her a glass. Why didn't you come by the house today? Busy, Raelle husked, another flare of desire shooting straight to her center at the brunette's feather-light touch. And here I thought you were hired to protect me. Scylla pouted and took a sip from the wine. Raelle lifted her own glass, taking a gulp to steel her nerves. I am protecting you. By spending the day with my staff, Scylla responded, a slight bite in her tone. By walking the grounds and determining the security features that need to be installed, Raelle answered evenly. I also need to make a better inspection of the house to determine any upgrades needed there. Inspect anything you like, Scylla said, leaning back on her stool, her voice suggestively seductive. I'll be over in the morning after I've had a chance to look at the other buildings on the property, Raelle answered, her tone flat. You could come over tonight, the musician suggested. I'm sure you'd enjoy inspecting my room. No, Raelle answered. Should we inspect your room instead? The musician asked, leaning forward and offering the blonde a glimpse of what was beneath her shirt. Scylla, Raelle began. Ah, no more of the Miss Ramshorn's nonsense, then. Raelle shook her head. No, Isadora said you'd insist we be on first-name basis. Good, Scylla answered. I'm used to getting what I want. Now about that inspection, Scylla said, brushing her hand over the blonde's forearm. Scylla, Raelle repeated, the edge of a warning in her voice. I'm here to keep you safe, not keep you entertained. The brunette quirked a brow, but she said nothing and after a moment lifted her glass and drained it. She leaned back on her stool again and sighed. Very well, perhaps not yet. Raelle's eyes widened, a bit surprised that it had been that easy to deter Scylla from what was an obvious proposition. She shifted uncomfortably on her stool, trying not to think about what yet could possibly entail. Despite her best efforts at controlling herself, just being in the brunette's presence had her more turned on she'd been in years and suddenly needing another shower. After a moment and another gulp of wine to calm herself, she tried to steer the conversation back to her duties while she had the brunette's attention to herself. There's a lot we need to discuss about the grounds. I'd like to go over the security measures I'd like to put in place. I told you yesterday that I don't care. Whatever you feel is necessary, I'll approve, Scylla answered. She stood up from the island, apparently ready to leave. There's one thing that I think will need your personal okay, Raelle said, recalling Helen's comments about the grounds. What? Scylla asked, her voice already indicating her boredom. All the landscaping. What about it? Scylla asked, her voice instantly sharp. It poses a serious security risk. Raelle began, intending to give the musician the same lecture she'd given her assistant earlier in the day. No one changes it. Scylla's voice had an air of finality. Raelle frowned. But the vines on the gate. What about them? Scylla asked. Do you realize how easy it would be for someone to scale the walls? I'm sure you pay thousands of dollars for them, and you're going to need to spend a lot more to properly secure your property. All that is moot if someone can just hop over the walls by climbing the vines like Tarzan. Scylla's azure eyes bore into Raelle's, but this time the blonde's gaze did not falter. Her eyes as hard as ice. After a moment, the brunette looked away. Fine, she conceded. I'll let Helen know that you can get rid of the greenery on the walls. The rest stays the same. Raelle didn't think that was nearly good enough, but she could tell it was the best she was going to get tonight. Thank you. Scylla nodded and moved quickly towards the door of the guest house. I'll see you later. At the sound of the guest house door closing, Raelle let out a shaky breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Please find the fanfiction you just listened to on Archive of Our Own, and leave the author some love. Without them, this wouldn't be possible, and we want to thank them from the bottoms of our hearts for creating these amazing stories and keeping the show alive.